June 7th, 1944, 600 hours, La Roche-Guyon, France. Generalfeldmarschall Rommel sits in his headquarters study, staring at a single-page intelligence report that will haunt him for the rest of his life. The numbers are simple, devastatingly simple. Allied forces landed on D-Day, 156,000 troops, German forces available to counter, 50,000, Allied naval vessels, 6,139 ships, German naval response, 0 ships, Allied aircraft overhead, 11,590, Luftwaffe sorties, flown, 319. He underlines one number 3 times, sets down his pen, says to his aide, "Wir haben bereits verloren, der Rest ist nur noch sterben. We've already lost. The rest is just dying." The mathematics of defeat. This is not a story about bravery or tactics. This is the story of when Germany's finest military minds looked at raw numbers and realized their entire strategic worldview had been a fantasy. When arithmetic defeated ideology. When field marshals, men who'd conquered nations, became accountants of their own annihilation. Before we continue, 10 seconds. If you want the real stories of WWW2, not the Hollywood versions, but the brutal mathematics that actually determined victory, hit subscribe right now. Every day we publish stories about the systems that won wars, the calculations, the cold reality behind the propaganda. The Allies landed 156,000 troops on D-Day. But what broke the Wehrmacht wasn't the landing, it was what came after. The logistics, the replacements, the math that couldn't be defeated. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Let's continue. The Atlantic Wall, Germany's great lie. 1942-1943, the propaganda machine's masterpiece. After the disaster at Stalingrad, Nazi propaganda needed a new narrative of invincibility. They found it in concrete, the Atlantic Wall. Dr. Joseph Goebbels' newsreels showed endless fortifications, massive gun emplacements, millions of tons of reinforced concrete, beach obstacles stretching for miles. The message, Fortress Europe is impregnable. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Supreme Commander West, knew better. His private assessment, documented in OB West, Western Command files from November 1943, the Atlantic Wall is a propaganda myth. We have strong points, yes, scattered defenses, but a continuous wall, non-existent. We have 2,000 miles of coastline to defend with 59 divisions, many understrength equipped with captured weapons, manned by soldiers too old or too young for Eastern Front service. The math was brutal. Coastline to defend, 200 kilometers. Divisions available, 59, many at 50-70% strength. Average defensive density, 1 division per 54 kilometers. Required density for effective defense, 1 division per 10 kilometers. Shortfall, 81% under minimum requirement. But Hitler's orders were absolute. Every meter of occupied Europe will be defended to the last man. Rundstedt understood the fatal flaw. You can't defend everything. But admitting that meant admitting the entire strategic premise that Germany could hold conquered territory indefinitely was false. So the lie was maintained, concrete was poured, propaganda was produced, and officers who knew better stayed silent. Rommel's awakening, December 1943. Rommel arrives to inspect Atlantic defenses. Fresh from North Africa and Italy, he brought veteran eyes to France's coastline. What he found shocked him. His inspection diary, preserved in the Bundesarchive, December 15, 1943, toured Pas-de-Calais fortifications, strong on paper, reality, gaps everywhere. Artillery positions lack ammunition, beach obstacles incomplete, minefields poorly maintained, troops demoralized. December 20, 1943. Memo with division commanders. Most have no combat experience. Equipment is obsolete or captured French Czech material. Fuel reserves, 3 days maximum. No strategic reserve. If Allies land, we fight with what's in position. January 8, 1944. Presented findings to Rundstedt. He agrees, but shrugs. What can we do? Hitler won't release reserves. The Luftwaffe can't protect us. The Kriegsmarine can't contest the channel, we can only make it expensive for them. But how expensive can we make it with 59 divisions against unlimited Anglo-American resources? Rommel understood something Rundstedt had accepted as unchangeable. The strategic mathematics were impossible. To defeat an invasion, doctrine required 3.1 defensive advantage. Defenders need 1/3 the force of attackers. Immediate counterattack within 24 hours of landing, air superiority to disrupt enemy landings, naval control to sink invasion fleets. Germany had none of these. The Luftwaffe was decimated fighting Allied bombers over Germany. The Kriegsmarine had been obliterated in the Atlantic. Panzer reserves were held inland, immobilized by Hitler's direct control. Rommel's solution: make the beaches themselves the killing ground, stop the invasion at the waterline because there would be no second chance. He ordered massive expansion of beach obstacles, minefields and fortifications, drove his engineers mercilessly, poured concrete day and night, but in private moments, documented in letters to his wife Lucy, "I'm building the Atlantic Wall knowing it cannot hold, but what else can I do? The alternative is to abandon France without a fight, and Hitler will never permit that. So I build, and I calculate, and I know the math doesn't work." The intelligence that couldn't be ignored. Spring 1944. German intelligence compiled reports that should have shattered every illusion. Fremde Heere West, Foreign Armies West, led by intelligence officer Oberst Alexis von Roener, assembled data from reconnaissance flights over England. Spy networks, most compromised by Allied counterintelligence. Signals, intelligence prisoner. Interrogations, photo analysis. The May 1944 summary report presented to OB West Allied ground forces in Britain, 45-50 divisions ready for invasion. Allied air superiority, 10.1 over German forces. Allied naval superiority, total control of Channel and Atlantic approaches. Allied logistics capacity, estimated 500,000 tons of supplies, pre-positioned. Estimated invasion force, 8 to 12. Divisions in initial assault, expanding to 40+ within 2 weeks. German forces to counter, 59 divisions spread across 2,000 miles. German reinforcement capability, 3 to 5 days to move reserves, if Hitler releases them. If Allied air forces don't destroy them en route, Rundstedt's chief of staff, General Günther Blumentritt, wrote in his diary, "The intelligence is clear. The Allies will land with overwhelming force. We cannot stop them on the beaches. We cannot counterattack effectively. We cannot resupply faster than they can. Every calculation shows defeat. Yet when I present this to the staff, they dismiss it. Allied propaganda." Exaggeration. Our soldiers' spirit will prevail. They refuse to accept what the numbers plainly show. We are going to lose. In the forbidden calculation, June 1st, 1944, 5 days before D-Day, in a meeting at La Roche-Guyon, Rommel presented what his staff privately called the forbidden calculation, a mathematical proof that the Atlantic Wall would fail. Using a chalkboard, he walked through the arithmetic. Assumption: Allies land 6 divisions on D-Day, conservative estimate. German response: 3 divisions in immediate contact, 2 more arriving within 24 hours, of 5 divisions total. Force ratio: 6.5 Allied advantage, below 3.1 needed for successful attack. Conclusion: Allies should fail at the beach, but then the reinforcement math, D+1, day 2. Allies land 4 more divisions, out 10 Allied divisions. German reinforcements, 1 additional division arrives, Darschern 6 German divisions. Ratio, 10.6, Archer 167, 1 Allied advantage. D+7, day 8, Allies land 12 more divisions, Halbig 22 Allied divisions. German reinforcements, 3 more divisions if not destroyed by air attack, Halbig 9 German divisions. Ratio 22-9 and 244, 1 Allied advantage. D+30, day 31, Allies consolidate 40+ divisions. German forces, 15-18 divisions, maximum possible. Ratio 40-18 at 2.22.1 Allied advantage. Approaching 3.1 offensive superiority, Rommel circled the final number, said even if we stop them on day 1, which we won't, by day 30, they have enough force to break out anywhere they choose. The only question is how many of our soldiers die before we're forced to retreat. The room fell silent. One officer, Major Hans von Luck, later recalled, "It was the first time anyone had said out loud what we all knew. The war in the West was already lost, we just hadn't admitted it yet." 5 days later, the math became reality. D-Day, when numbers became corpses, June 6, 1944. Aero 6, 30 hours, Normandy beaches. The reports flooded into Rommel's headquarters. He was in Germany for his wife's birthday, a coincidence. That would haunt him. Aero 700 hours, massive airborne landings reported, paratroops behind coastal defenses. Aero 730 hours, naval bombardment of unprecedented scale, hundreds of ships visible. 800 hours, ground landings on 5 beaches, thousands of troops coming ashore. Rommel raced back to France, arrived at 2200 hours, demanded situation report. What he heard confirmed his worst calculations. Allied troops landed, 156,000 German defenders engaged, approximately 50,000 casualties, German estimate, 4,000, 9,000 Allied, 1,000 German, actual numbers would prove different. Beach obstacles, effectiveness, minimal. Allies landed at high tide, bypassing most defenses, Luftwaffe sorties, 3 Notch 9 flights against 11,590 Allied aircraft. Naval engagement, none. Kriegsmarine unable to contest landing. But the number that broke Rommel was this: German counterattack forces deployed, 0 Hitler, believing Normandy was a feint and the real invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, refused to release panzer reserves. The 12th SS Panzer Division, positioned 20 miles inland, sat immobile for 18 hours waiting for permission to attack. By the time Hitler authorized movement, Allied air forces had achieved such total dominance that daylight movement was suicide. Rommel's June the 7th diary entry. "So the invasion I predicted has occurred. The response I calculated as necessary has been denied. We are now fighting their battle, static defense against overwhelming material superiority. This is exactly how to lose." The logistics nightmare, math vs. will, June 8-20, 1944. The beachhead consolidates. Wehrmacht officers watched with professional horror as Allied logistics machinery demonstrated capacities they'd considered impossible. June 8th, D+2. Mulberry artificial harbours begin construction. Prefabricated sections towed across channel. German engineering assessment. Technically ingenious, strategically devastating. They're building ports where none existed. Within days they'll have harbour capacity exceeding Cherbourg. June 12th, D+6. Over 326,000 troops, 54,000 vehicles, 104,000 tons of supplies landed. German logistics assessment. Their resupply rate exceeds our entire Army Group West consumption rate. They're landing more per day than we use per week. June 18th, D+12. Great storm hits Normandy. Destroys 1 Mulberry harbour. Pauses landings for 3 days. German hope. Natural forces accomplish what we couldn't. Perhaps this will slow them enough for us to organise proper defence. June 22nd, D+116. Storm clears. Landings resume at increased pace. Allies compensate for storm delays by accelerating operations. German despair. Even nature cannot stop them. They simply build more, land more, overwhelm any obstacle through sheer material excess. Rommel wrote to Rundstedt on June 20th, "We face an enemy who can afford to waste. They fire 10 artillery shells. Where we fire 1, they abandon damaged vehicles rather than repair them because replacements arrive faster. They eat fresh food, while our troops forage for bread. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial annihilation. They have systematized victory." The forbidden meeting, generals confront reality, June 17, 1944, Marshals, France. Hitler travels to France, his only visit to the Western Front after D-Day, to meet Rommel and Rundstedt. The field marshals prepare briefings showing the impossible situation. Allied forces in Normandy, 557,000 troops. German forces, 250,000, many units at 50% strength. Allied material advantage, tanks, 4.1 artillery, 3.1 aircraft, 21 supplies, 10.1 Rommel's recommendation. Mein Führer, the mathematics are unsustainable. We must negotiate while we still hold some territory. Every day we delay, the Allied advantage grows. Within 2 months, they'll break out. 6 months, they'll reach the Rhine. 1 year, Berlin. Hitler's response, documented by multiple witnesses. Mathematics? You speak to me of mathematics? Where is the warrior's spirit? Where is faith in final victory? We will smash them with new weapons, V1, V2, jet aircraft, super tanks. We will throw them back into the sea. Rundstedt, emboldened by Rommel's directness. Mein Führer, new weapons won't arrive in time. The V weapons are terror weapons, not military game changers. Jet aircraft production is too slow. The Allies are landing 30,000 tons of supplies per day. We cannot match this. Hitler. Then you are defeated in your minds before the battle is lost. Perhaps I need commanders with more faith. The meeting ended in acrimony. 2 weeks later, Rundstedt was relieved of command, officially pumped for health reasons. Rommel began plotting to remove Hitler entirely. The breaking point, Falaise Pocket, August 12-21, 1944, Falaise, France. After 6 weeks of grinding attrition, American forces broke through German lines at Avranches. General Patton's Third Army raced through the gap, swinging wide to encircle German forces in Normandy. Hitler ordered, "No retreat, hold Falaise, counterattack and cut off the American spearhead." The arithmetic was insane. German forces in pocket, 100,000 troops, 2 Panzer Corps, Allied forces encircling, 400,000 plus troops, German escape routes, narrowing to 10-mile gap, Allied air superiority, total. Daylight movement will be death. Generalfeldmarschall Günther von Kluge, Rundstedt's replacement, faced an impossible choice. Obey Hitler and watch his armies be annihilated, or disobey and be executed for treason. He chose a third option, allow local commanders to, you would interpret, orders flexibly. Some units retreated, some stayed. Chaos resulted. By August 24th, the Falaise Pocket closed. German casualties, 50,000 captured, 10,000 killed. Equipment destroyed. 344 tanks, 2,047 vehicles, 252 artillery pieces. A German staff officer, Major Eberhard Wildermuth, walked through the pocket after surrender. The roads were graveyards of equipment. Burned tanks, abandoned guns, dead horses. Yes, we still used horses, thousands of them rotting in summer heat. Allied aircraft had shot everything that moved. I did the math in my head. To replace these losses would require 6 months of full production. But Germany no longer had 6 months. We no longer had the factories. Allied bombers had destroyed them. We no longer had the fuel. Romania's oil fields were lost. We no longer had the men. An entire generation was already dead in Russia. At Falaise, I realized the war wasn't ending in defeat. It had already ended. We were just continuing to die. When obedience became suicide. September 1944. German forces retreat across France. Hitler issued increasingly delusional orders. Hold Paris to the last man. Every bridge will be defended. No retreat without my personal authorization. But something unprecedented happened. German commanders stopped obeying, not publicly, not as mutiny, but through passive resistance. General Dietrich von Koltitz, commander of Paris, received orders to destroy the city rather than surrender it. He calculated explosives required insufficient for complete destruction. Time required days. Allies would arrive in hours, military value none. Paris's destruction served no strategic purpose. Historical consequence, eternal infamy. He surrendered Paris intact on August 25, 1944. Hitler ordered his arrest. Choltitz was still in command a month later. The machinery of enforcement was breaking down. Other generals made similar calculations. General Johannes Blaskowitz, Netherlands, ignored orders to flood the country, sparing millions of Dutch civilians. General Hermann Balck, Lorraine, conducted strategic retreats, Hitler without authorization, saving his forces from encirclement. Generalfeldmarschall Model, Army Group B, reinterpreted hold at all costs as delay as long as tactically viable. Each commander risked execution. Each calculated that obeying meant death anyway, death of their soldiers in hopeless battles. The Wehrmacht was conducting a silent rebellion, fighting the war they knew they'd lost while preserving what could be saved. The July 20th aftermath, when hope died. July 20th, 1944. Bomb plot against Hitler fails. Rommel, implicated, was forced to commit suicide on October 14th. His death broke something in the officer corps. Before July 20th, officers could privately hope for regime change, that Germany might negotiate surrender with honor, that someone would stop the madness. After July 20th, the Gestapo arrested 7,000 people, executed 4,080. Hundreds of officers, including many with no connection to the plot, were tortured and killed. The message was clear: there is no escape. Fight or die, probably both. General Heinz Guderian, appointed chief of the General Staff after the purge, later wrote, "After July 20th we fought without hope. Not for victory, we knew that was impossible. Not for Hitler, most of us despised him by then. We fought because refusing meant death for ourselves and our families. We fought because the alternative, Soviet occupation, seemed worse than prolonging the inevitable. We became accountants of death, calculating how many soldiers must die to buy time for civilians to flee west. How many cities must be destroyed to delay the Red Army for another week? Mathematics of desperation. In the final calculation, December 1944, Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last offensive. The operations planning documents captured after the war reveal officers' private assessments. Official objective: break through to Antwerp, split Allied armies, negotiate separate peace with Western allies. Actual objective: internal memos. Be time, delay Allied advance. Perhaps convince them Germany is still dangerous enough that they should negotiate rather than demand unconditional surrender. The math never worked. German forces committed 30 divisions, 1,400 tanks, 2,000 artillery pieces. Fuel available, enough for 100 kilometers. Antwerp was 150 kilometers away. Required assumption: capture Allied fuel depots within 48 hours. Probability of success: senior commanders privately estimated 5 to 10%, but Hitler ordered it, so they attacked. General Major Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, wrote after the war, "Every general staff officer knew the offensive would fail. We couldn't say so. We calculated supply requirements, movement times, fuel consumption. Every metric showed failure, but we attacked anyway because the alternative was immediate execution. When we ran out of fuel exactly where calculations predicted, some called it bad luck. It wasn't luck, it was arithmetic." By January 1945, the Bulge offensive had collapsed. German casualties: 100,000 equipment destroyed, 800 tanks, 1,000 aircraft, irreplaceable losses. Strategic result: the Western Front's collapse accelerated, and Germany's generals knew the mathematics of defeat were now inevitable. When the math finally stopped, May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders unconditionally. In POW camps and interrogation rooms, Allied intelligence officers asked the same question: "Well, when did you realize you'd lost?" The answers varied. Generalfeldmarschall Kesselring: "After Normandy I knew, but I'd suspected since Stalingrad." General Guderian: "Moscow, 1941. We didn't reach it. That meant attrition war. Germany couldn't win attrition." General Blumentritt: "D-Day. The numbers were undeniable. Field Marshal Keitel, Hitler's yes man. We never lost. We were betrayed. Nobody believed him. But the most honest answer came from an unnamed Oberst, colonel, in American custody. I'll tell you when we lost, the moment we believed our own propaganda, when we thought spirit could defeat statistics, when we calculated that 1 German equaled 3 Russians or 2 Americans, when we convinced ourselves that courage mattered more than supply chains. We lost when we stopped doing math honestly. The accountants were right. Post-war analysis proved what the calculations had shown. Total Allied production, 1939 to 1945. Tanks, 227,000 aircraft, 633,000 artillery, 914,000 trucks, 4,100,000. Total German production, 1939-1945. Tanks, 67,000 aircraft, 190,000 artillery, 159,000 trucks, 346,000 ratio. Allies outproduced Germany 3-1 to 12.1, depending on category. But here's what broke the general's worldview. Germany couldn't have won even with perfect tactics, perfect morale, perfect leadership. The mathematics were impossible from the start. 1 German tank crew, no matter how skilled, couldn't defeat 3 Allied tanks. 1 German division, no matter how motivated, couldn't hold against 5 Allied divisions. 1 German factory, no matter how efficient, couldn't match 10 Allied factories. The war was a math problem, and Germany couldn't solve it. The lesson Wehrmacht officers learned, too late, became fundamental to modern military doctrine. Wars are won by logistics, not courage. Tactical brilliance cannot overcome strategic impossibility. Accurate calculation beats optimistic faith every time. Today's military academies study not just D-Day tactics, but the mathematical inevitability of Allied victory. They study how German generals knew they'd lost but continued fighting anyway. They study the psychology of refusing to accept numbers, because the Wehrmacht's tragedy wasn't that they lost. Every nation that fights loses eventually. Their tragedy was knowing they'd lost and fighting anyway, spending lives like currency in a bank already foreclosed. The uncomfortable truth, Rommel was right. In June 1944, the war was over. The rest was just dying. And 800,000 German soldiers died in the West after D-Day, fighting a war their own commanders knew was mathematically unwinnable. Think about this. You're a German field marshal on June 7, 1944. You've just seen D-Day intelligence. 156,000 Allied troops landed, more coming every day. Your reserves are denied, your air force is destroyed, your navy is non-existent. You do the math, you know you can't win. Here's my question, what would you have done? Obey Hitler and watch your soldiers die in a lost cause? Disobey and face execution? Surrender and be branded a coward? Or would you have done what Rommel considered, tried to remove Hitler, negotiate surrender, save what could be saved? There's no good answer. That's the point. Leave your answer in the comments. At what point does obedience become murder? If this changed how you see WW2 leadership, here's what I need. Subscribe to WW2 History Hub. Every week we publish stories about the math behind the battles, the calculations that determined victory before the first shot was fired. Hit the bell. YouTube buries this content otherwise. Real numbers, verified sources, the arithmetic of survival on the Eastern Front. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the trenches.